Hello, lovely people. Today we were looking at some dust caps. First of all, before we begin, I want to thank Frank from HEPAKing for sending me these Alpine drivers, the DP series and status. Without that, I wouldn't be able to do any of these kind of tests and experiments. So what do we have here? Drivers have different dust caps, yeah? Most common one would be like a dome dust cap that has this SB Acoustics, SB17 that I have. It's a dome dust cap. Then we have this is Fatal Pro 6FE100, which has a concave dust cap, so it goes together with the cone. And now these two Alpines, they have what's called a face plug. So the DP series has a face plug that is attached to the cone, and Alpine Status has a dust cap that is separate from the cone and is attached to the motor assembly itself. Now, what do these dust caps or face plugs actually do? And do they do anything? That's what I'm going to try to find out. In order to do that, I need to measure a frequency response of all these drivers. So for that, I made a test enclosure. So this is a sealed, about 16-liter test enclosure, which is made from literally scraps of wood that I have, chipboard, 9mm MDF. It doesn't really matter at all as long as it's kind of sealed. So it is properly sealed. I tested it, it's fine. And for this particular experiment, this enclosure is going to be absolutely fine. Now, dust caps and these face plugs. People say online that there are some scientific papers for that. I haven't read them because it's fun to experiment and it's fun to find out everything by yourself. So people say that these face plugs, they make the off-axis response better and kind of extends, because as we know, the driver starts to beam when the wavelength of the sound becomes smaller than the diameter of the cone. So for a 6.5-inch driver, it starts to beam somewhere close to like 550, 600 hertz. And then the higher the frequency, the beam narrows, and like 4K or whatever, it's only like a laser beam pointing just straight, and it doesn't produce any sound off axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put each of these drivers in this test enclosure. I'm going to try to find a space outside where I can rotate this box. So this, for example, now this box is about like what, 30, 45 degrees off axis. Then you can twist it a bit more, 60 degrees and 90 degrees. I will be trying to test the frequency response from on axis all the way up to 90 degrees, because when you're in a car and you have your driver's side, so in the UK we have driver's side on the right side, so I will have driver in the door, for example, like this, which is close to 90-degree off axis. That's what I want to see how they perform off axis. Obviously, one thing to note is that if you want to do a fair, proper comparison between various dust caps, you should have a single same driver with different dust caps. However, I don't have that. I don't have the luxury to order one type of driver made custom with different dust caps. So it's kind of, maybe it's not fair comparison, but the thing is I want to see if there is a difference. Just the only thing is what I'm doing, I don't care about absolutes. I care about relative things. So whenever I'm measuring a distortion and everything, I'm comparing with something. And now I'm going to be measuring the frequency response between these drivers. And of course, it's going to vary because the cone material is different, the surround is different. So the frequency response itself will vary because of these things, not necessarily because of the dust caps or face plugs. But we will see. We will see how it's going to go. For these specific measurements, the low-end extension of the drivers don't matter at all, because it should like as I mentioned, they start to be in about 600 hertz. So everything below 600 hertz doesn't really matter because they're going to be omnidirectional. What matters is the high-end extension is above like 1K, 2K, 3K, and above. So for two-way systems. And then we're going to see if these drivers are part of a three-way set. And we will hopefully see if the face plug matters at all in a three-way system or only in a two-way, and if it does matter, so how much. If you follow my channel as well, you probably know that I have my drivers not in the doors but in the kicks, and I have them not only in the kicks but I have them inverted as well, just like that, so the magnet is facing up. So the plan is in this box to mount the driver properly like that, and then mount it inverse and check the frequency response with the driver being inverse on axis, and again all the way up to 90-degree off axis. And we will see how there will be a difference, I guarantee, how big of a difference is going to be between the driver playing like normally or inverted with the motor facing towards you. So this is the general plan. Now I'm gonna go outside, try to find a space and set up everything, and then I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna be making all those measurements. Okay, so this is gonna be my measuring setup. I think it's gonna be the dodgiest setup that anybody ever saw, but whatever. So I have this space to play with. It's basically next to my house. I have neighbors that don't live there, and this is my house. And basically I have all of this area, which is like 7 meters across, so 3.5 meters one way and the other way. So I've set up this one. These are my bookshelf stands. Clamp them together so they won't fall down, and I have a speaker facing that way because that way is the street and this way is nothing, so hopefully I'm not gonna annoy any neighbors. The microphone is at the same level as the driver, and if you can see, they align on axis perfectly. Then at the bottom I have, these are my angle measurements. I know. So I have 30 degrees, 60 degrees, and 90 degrees. I will be measuring 90 degrees as well because, like in the car, if you have your mid bass in the door and you're sitting there, it's like 80, close to 90 degrees. So I just want to see how big a difference it is. Take a measurement, flip it a little bit, 30 degrees, take another measurement, flip it, 30 degrees, another measurement, 90 degrees. Then I will be swapping the driver inside out, changing the drivers to see, hopefully, if there's a difference between any of them. So yeah, let me bring my laptop and let's start with the measurements. Okay, and this is the final setup. So I have some extension cords, my home amplifier that is from the laptop, RW output. From the laptop is going to the amplifier, from the amplifier is going into the speaker, and then the microphone USB goes back into the laptop. And I have one of the measurements, so just to demonstrate how I'm making them, I set the here in analysis default gating I set to 5 milliseconds because 5 milliseconds corresponds to about 200 hertz, and I don't care anything below that, just on the upper. And if I go to measure, I am measuring here from 200 hertz to 20. And if I click this, and I have a measurement. Yeah. So funny thing is, I had a lot of people come and pass, and they see this. It's like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I was like, yeah, I'm making an experiment. And kids were like, oh, you're a scientist or something. Yeah, it's funny. So I hope I'm not gonna annoy the neighbors because all the sound is going nowhere. And yeah, let's make some measurements. Let's have some fun. So it's already getting dark, but the neighbors are still not complaining, so that's good. So just I want to show you how I'm doing inverted. So it's literally same like in my kicks. The driver is inverted and mounted like this, and exactly the same on the pedestal and measuring. So just for how I'm measuring the inverted driver. Okay, I think I'm done. It's oof, 10 o'clock in the evening. I have 56 measurements. Yeah, this was the last one, SB17, inverted, 90-degree angle. Yeah, it took me about an hour to do all of them. Cool, let's jump into the laptop and let's have a look what we have. And here we have all 56 measurements. So we're not going to go through all of them because now it looks a mess, but we're going to try somehow to make sense of with all of them. Let's start with something very simple by comparing these four drivers, regular 0-degree on-axis measurements. So here we have SB17, SB acoustics. Here we have the status, the DP series, and Fatal Pro. There you go. They look very similar. Differences are at the top end where you have the cone breakup and something is happening here. So Fatal Pro is just the highlighted one. It has a cone breakup at about 3.6K. And then after the cone breakup, it falls down and probably here there's another, actually let's remove them. These ones, yes, it's easier to see, and there might be another cone breakup and then it falls down and here is just a total mess, but in general it has a rising response. Now these measurements, as I mentioned, they're not absolute and they're not perfectly correct because it might be influenced by the baffle itself, like the box that I made. However, for comparison reasons, since all of the drivers are in the same baffle, same box, it should be fine. So that's the Fatal Pro. The SB17, a very smooth response. Again, peak here, probably cone breakup, another cone breakup here. So it's very similar to the Fatal Pro. It's just SB plays higher all the way up to like 12K, but this is cone breakup, so it's not gonna sound very nice. But they measure very similarly. Now let's have a look at the Alpine stuff. So this is the status and this is the DP. Now both of these drivers exhibit a dip in here. The DP series has a dip at 840 and the status 1.2K. Now I was wondering, could this be caused by the actual dust cap, the face plug? However, I did take measurements inverted. So let's compare the status very quickly with inverted. Status 0 degrees inverted. And you see the same dip appears in all the other measurements as well. So this is not caused by the face plug because face plug obviously is facing only one way. If you invert the driver, then it shouldn't be there. So this is not a face plug issue. This is going to be the driver issue. Maybe the surround, because the Satori that I have in the dash 5-inch have a similar dip in similar frequency, and that is known to be caused by the surround. However, the status, there's no noticeable cone breakup that I can see. So this is a carbon fiber cone, which is extremely stiff and rigid and quite heavy. And as you can see, the response is very flat all the way up to like 11K. So potentially this driver could be used almost full range, I want to say, apart from this nasty dip and a peak here. I don't know what's there. A little peak here. And maybe this is the cone breakup at what, 15K? Maybe potentially, because after that it drops down. So this is the status, and the DP series has a similar cone. However, it's not as rigid and it has a lot of breakups here above 4.5K. However, the response is very smooth all the way up to 4K. A little dip here for some reason, but yeah, above 4K is just blah 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 blah. So very quickly, let's have a look at how they perform off axis. So this is the SB17. Yeah, so it falls down. The level drops as well because you have less and less driver pointing towards you. And I want to say like above 3K, it all goes to mess. just like that. But yeah, nothing really special. Now let's have a look at the Fatal Pro. Fatal Pro, pum, pum, pum. Yeah, very similar. Again, it's just the random stuff starts happening quite a bit earlier, like here at 2.5K, and then it goes like all bonkers. Then we have DP. Oh, by the way, I will upload this file as well for you to have a look if you want to browse by yourself, taking your time. So DP series, very similar as well, up to 2.7. After that, it goes all to hell. And this is something interesting. So if I take, now let's have a look at the status first. Status. Bam, bam. Yeah. Oh, not this one. Yeah, I have everything. And very similar. So this one plays a bit higher, all the way up to like 3.4K, and then it goes to hell. Now, what I noticed with the higher angle, let's say 75 and 90, actually even 60, this looks like, actually this one, 45, this looks like comp filtering to me, these dips. And I have similar on the DP. There you go. On the DP, it isn't more pronounced, like this, very large dips. And it looks like comp filtering. So these are the Alpine drivers with the face plugs. If you have a look at, for example, the SB, 45, 60, 75, you don't really see that. Maybe some here at like 10K if I remove this, but not as bad. This is 60 degrees, not as bad as the DP series at the same angle. Look, what's the difference? SB acoustics, and that's the DP with all this comp filtering. So maybe this comp filtering is caused by the face plug. Alpine status at 60, it has what looks to be comp filtering here, but in higher frequency. See this 90, not as bad. At 45, there we go. At 45, this looks like comp filtering. So to me, it looks like the face plug off axis at very high frequencies, it adds some comp filtering compared to regular dust cap or concave. 45. Yeah. So this is comparison of this is 45, 45, 45. So SB acoustics plays very nice with 45-degree angle all the way up to 7.5K. And these two with the face plugs, they have issues above 4K. So I don't know if it's just because of the dust cap face plug issue or is the driver itself somehow. Now, one thing I want to have a look at is the inverse driver, how they perform inverse. So if I compare the SB17 with SB17 inverse, that's on axis. As you can see, it plays exactly the same all the way up to like 800 hertz. And after that, you have differences between cone facing you or motor facing you. And here at the top end is a total mess. So for SB acoustics, it's about 800 hertz. If we have a look at status and status inverse, very similar, just a bit lower, above 600 hertz. Down to 600, up to 600 is fine. After that, it's kind of blah, blah, blah. And here above 2K, it's total nightmare. And I think it has to do with the fact that even in general, if you have a look at SB17 inverse, so this is all inverse with different angles. Yeah, this is SB17, and you can see that there's differences. Here is a mess. However, it doesn't really like fall down as much. And if I compare this to the status, like this, status falls down quite a lot. And I think it might have to do with the fact that status has a very large motor and very little space, like open space where the cone can be seen through the back. And SB Acoustics has a very open basket from the back, loads of space, loads of airspace coming through. Maybe because of that, I don't know. But yeah, so this is inverse. So with the inverse, not inverse, my conclusion is that below 600 hertz, we can have a look at Fatal Pro as well. Let's say 30 degrees Fatal Pro and 30 degrees Fatal Pro, like here, 600 hertz again. Inverted and not inverted, below 600 hertz, doesn't matter. Everything shows above that. So like if you use your driver in a three-way and you cross it, what, 200, 300, 400 hertz, it doesn't matter if the mid-bass driver is cone facing you or the motor facing you. Where it does matter if you play it in a two-way system where you want to play it higher up to 2 or 3K, then it matters. And then, of course, the angling matters as well. So I made another RW file, which is this one. And I know it looks a mess. Let me explain. So this is a very high scale, it's 20 dB scale, just for easier to see how different drivers differ from one each other. So the top one is, which one is it? Fatal Pro. Top one is Fatal Pro, then SB17, then DP with this dip at 800, and this is the status. And this is all the way from 0 to 90 degree. And what we can see from this, it's a bit of a mess. So what I did, another thing is I normalized these responses. What I did, I took the on-axis measurement. I can show you actually how I did this. Trace arithmetic. I took the on-axis measurement here, and then I took the angle measurement, and one divided by the other. And then if you take on-axis is going to give you a line, a perfect line. And then if you take the other measurement, it's going to give you like a measurement in relation to the on-axis. So it's a bit easier to see. And I have made all of these. So these are normalized measurements. The single line compared to all the other ones. I don't know if it does make sense, but it does make sense to me because it's easier to see like the differences, because the top one here, the on-axis response is different for every driver. However, if you normalize it, it's in relation to the on-axis response. So it's a bit different and it looks better. And from this, what we can see is, first of all, where these lines are starting to diverge from on-axis. And this is about here, yeah? Slightly different for the Fatal Pro. Is it Fatal Pro? Yeah, so Fatal Pro. For Fatal Pro, slightly different, something is happening here. But for all other ones, as you can see, 500, everything below 500, and all the way up to 550, 540, this is the same. And this is the point where the 6.5-inch driver is starting to beam, and then it starts to diverge. So if you play this driver up to 500, 550, it doesn't matter where it's aimed. If it's aimed on axis or 90 degree off axis, for the frequency response, it absolutely doesn't matter. It does matter slightly, but you have some little variations, maybe like 3 or 4 dB. But in general, it doesn't matter if it's 90 degree on axis or if it's 90 degree off axis or on axis, below for a 6.5-inch. If you're playing higher, like up to 2K, then the orientation matters. So for a driver in a three-way system, again, orientation doesn't matter. For a driver in a two-way system, angling the driver facing towards you matters quite a lot, especially if you want to play that driver up to 3K or 2.5K, where you're usually crossing it to a tweeter, because tweeters don't play down to 1000 hertz. You need to cross it somewhere here. Yeah. And from these normalized measurements, what you can see is a potential benefit or not benefit of the actual thing that I'm trying to measure, the dust cap or the face plug. So the top one, Fatal Pro, has the concave dust cap. And as you can see, all these splits are very similar. It goes like similarly down, all the way down to 2.6K. And then you have differences between angles. But of course, this is extreme. I'm taking 75 and 90 degree angles as well, because again, we're using it in a car. So this up to 2.6. Then SB17, which is this one, the second one, these are diverging all the way, maybe down to 3K or maybe even lower. But then this 90 degree, this is a potential cancellation. That is one of the reasons why I didn't use any smoothing, because with smoothing, this is going to be hidden. So it does, the off-axis response is nicer compared to the Fatal Pros. It goes all the way up to 3 and even more, 3.1K. Now the DP series that has the face plug integrated into the cone, it acts similarly to the Fatal Pro, that these responses are matching only like 2.75K, so it doesn't do really much, it looks like it. However, the Status, the one that has the face plug attached to the motor, you can see that these lines are going very nicely, apart from this slight bump, all the way to like 3.4K, which is the highest of all these three drivers, like these lines. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to make, the point with this. I'm just trying to make it easier to see the differences, because if you're looking at this with all these measurements, you don't really see that. But with this, I think it's easier to illustrate. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that Alpine Status, with the face plug integrated into the motor, has the nicest roll-off for the off-axis response, all the way up to 3.4K, and it would be very good to integrate it into a two-way, like if you played a two-way system, to integrate it into a tweeter, for like maybe 2.5 or 3K if you cross it to the tweeter. But DP series, much lower, like 2.7. And these again, Fatal Pro, even lower than that. And SB17, 3K, yeah, it could be integrated into the tweeter as well. So I would like to hear your opinions as well. What do you think about this? Do face plugs really make a big difference? Because from what I'm seeing here, they don't. Maybe they're extending a little bit, like maybe 500 hertz, maybe 1000 hertz, but I was expecting the difference to be somewhere here, like in the lower frequencies. But since only in the very high frequencies that you can actually see the difference. And for a driver, especially these two Alpines, they're used in a three-way system. That face plug, in my opinion, is just a gimmick, and it doesn't add anything, because especially if you cross it, like even with passive crossovers, if you cross it at 1000 hertz, it doesn't make a difference, because 90 degrees or on axis, it's literally like 3-4 dB difference, and it doesn't make any difference, that face plug. It's exactly the same like if you would have a regular dust cap or a concave. And one thing as well with alpine status, you're losing the cone area because the face plug takes a lot of like real estate on the cone. So in my opinion, these face plugs are a gimmick, especially in a three-way system. Um, is this a scientific proof that face plug extends the off-axis frequency response? I don't know. It's for you to decide. But for me, these face plugs, I don't know, they're not very convincing. Yeah, I would like to hear your thoughts. Please comment below the video or on Facebook, and we can have a discussion about this. Oh, and by the way, I will try to do something similar with the mid-range drivers, the 3.5, because these are all 6.5 inch, and I would like to do something similar with 3.5 inch drivers. I just need to find one with a dome dust cap to see if there is a difference. So yeah, if you want to see that, subscribe and follow me. I think that's the first time that I said it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.